America is handing out nuclear submarines to an ally. Here's what you need to know. The UK, US, and Australia have announced a security pact aimed at confronting China, whereby Australia will be provided with the technology to build nuclear-powered submarines for the first time, according to the BBC. Australia says it will abide by the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty in not pursuing nuclear weapons, but the move could still indirectly spur the proliferation of nuclear weapons because of the technology it involves and the precedents it sets, according to The Guardian. The risk has been taken to allow Australia's currently diesel-powered navy to match China's technology, with the practical advantages of nuclear submarines being that they can move at faster speeds for longer and more stealthily than conventional ones, according to CNN, which adds that these submarines need to surface less often. But there is also a clear symbolic element to the technology transfer, with one US official explaining to CNN that allowing Australia to be only the sixth country in the world to own nuclear submarines is frankly an exception to our policy in many respects. The pact, known as AUKUS, which also covers artificial intelligence, quantum technologies, and cyber warfare, is designed as a response to China's military buildup in the Indo-Pacific, according to the BBC. The Guardian and the Financial Times offer two contrasting schools of thought on the wider implications of the arrangement. Quoted in the Financial Times, the head of Foreign and Defense Policy at the American Enterprise Institute said Wednesday's deal was an elegant message, a reminder to China that Australia has the technological capabilities and alliance relationships that they could become a nuclear power if the threat China poses becomes so severe. Quite what the world has come to when gifting someone nuclear-powered submarines is considered an elegant act of subtle genius is likely beyond the remit of this video. However, the same head of Foreign and Defense Policy did also add that this is a good moment for the Biden administration to demonstrate its commitment to the security of its allies after the debacle of the US withdrawal from Afghanistan. And that's perhaps something almost everyone can agree on. Handing over weapons to Australia is at least a moderate improvement on handing over weapons to the Taliban. Dialing down the fawning sycophancy, though, The Guardian notes that critics of the agreement warn that it sets a dangerous precedent for countries to exploit a loophole in the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. That treaty doesn't rule out non-nuclear weapon countries building nuclear-powered submarines or removing the fissile material they need for the reactors from the stockpile monitored by the International Atomic Energy Agency. But that does open up the possibility that the material could be diverted towards making weapons, and The Guardian explains that Australia would be the first country to make use of that loophole. James Acton, co-chair of the Nuclear Policy Program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, said, "My concern is not that Australia would misuse the nuclear material we give them and use the loophole to build nuclear weapons. My concern is it sets a terrible precedent that other countries could abuse. Iran is the obvious example here. We would go batshit if Iran removed nuclear material from safeguards." David Cullen of the Nuclear Information Service made a similar point. This has only happened once before in history, when the US helped the UK develop its first nuclear-powered submarines. The question will be how will the Australians be supplied and whether they want to develop their own nuclear capability to enrich uranium fuel, Cullen added. Whatever your view on if it's right or wrong, it's clear why it's happening. CNN characterizes the development as the latest step by the US to push back against China's military and technological rise, and notes that next week President Biden will also host a summit of the Quad partnership of Japan, Australia, India, and the US. The Quad is another grouping viewed as part of a growing attempt to push American influence in Asia. After its inception in response to the 2004 Boxing Day tsunami, China's concerns about the group's influence led to members hitting the brakes on the partnership, according to the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. But approaches now appear to be shifting, and the group held its first military exercises together last year and the first leadership meeting in March. In the foreground of the current bad atmosphere between the US and China is a dispute over the US conducting naval exercises in the South China Sea last week. A US Navy aircraft carrier strike group and a destroyer operated in the South China Sea last Wednesday, days after China introduced a law requiring foreign vessels to give notice before entering waters it claims as its own. Guided missile destroyer USS Benfold traveled within 12 nautical miles of Mischief Reef in the Spratly Islands, according to a US Navy press release Wednesday, and the USS Carl Vinson, along with its strike group, also trained in the same region. Responding to that development, the editor-in-chief of Chinese state media mouthpiece, The Global Times, has now tweeted, "Hopefully when Chinese warships pass through the Caribbean Sea or show up near Hawaii and Guam one day, the US will uphold the same standard of freedom of navigation." He added that day will come soon. So the back and forth of military escalation looks set to continue, and it's worth reminding ourselves of why, in general, that's a bad idea for the world. In 2018, a very expensive submarine in India was put out of commission for at least 10 months because someone in the Navy forgot basic training. The INS Arahant is the country's first nuclear-powered submarine. It's equipped with torpedoes and ballistic missiles and cost a whopping $2.9 billion. Some genius left an external hatch open while the sub was at harbor, inevitably causing seawater to pour in once it dove underwater. The vessel's entire propulsion chamber got flooded as a result of human error, which led to severe damage. Water had to be pumped out of the submarine and the pipes replaced since they were exposed to corrosive seawater. This is just a reminder that, however careful and good at building insane technology we are still human, and human error is going to remain a factor in whatever environment we exist in. A world full of high-powered weapons raises the stakes on every mistake or momentary lapse of judgment.
For a small island nation, the United Kingdom holds what some consider an outsized role in global affairs. This is largely due to the country's nuclear strike capabilities, something that British politicians this week voted overwhelmingly to continue. On Monday, July 18th, the British Parliament voted 427 to 117 to renew the UK's fleet of Trident submarines, the country's sole nuclear weapons system. One of these 4 Vanguard-class submarines constantly patrols the world's oceans. The vessels are virtually undetectable because they use a nuclear-powered reactor. The submarines can be armed with up to 40 nuclear warheads, host 132 crew, and numerous torpedoes. Each measures around 150 meters in length. Nuclear missiles in Trident submarines have a range of up to 7,500 miles, potentially allowing the UK to strike most of the world. The fleet operate out of the Fastland Naval Base in Scotland, with one always on patrol around the world. The British government estimates the cost of Trident to be around $40 billion, but some say that could rise to more than $200 billion over the project's lifetime.
For more news animations and explainers, hit the subscribe and bell button to join the TomoNews family. Thanks for watching.